Hey guys, welcome to Digit.in, and today we're going to be reviewing the camera on the Redmi Note 9 Pro. Now before we get in, I do want to give you guys a disclaimer. When Xiaomi shared this review unit with us, they said that it is expected to receive a software update that would enhance certain functionality of the smartphone. However, by the time that we've been recording this video, the update is not yet out and we're not really sure exactly what areas of the smartphone that update is supposed to improve. However, despite that, here is a review of the camera based on a lot of the samples that we've shot in the last few days. Let's begin. But before we go ahead, make sure to hit the subscribe button on our channel and don't miss out on hitting that bell icon, because that's what will make sure that you get every update from us in the future. But before we get into the images, let's just quickly go over the specs. It's got a quad camera setup on the back and a single punch hole camera in the front. On the back, you have a 48 megapixel primary sensor. This is a new sensor by Samsung, the GM2, and it's still got the half-inch size. There's an 8 megapixel ultra-wide sensor and a 5 megapixel macro lens, and also a depth sensor to help you take better portrait shots. On the front, the selfie camera is a 16 megapixel shooter. Now let's just quickly jump into the camera of the Redmi Note 9 Pro, and I want to start off with the low light mode because that's something that was easily noticeable. Now in low light, we noticed that due to a lack of any kind of stabilization, it's very difficult to get a stable shot on the Note 9 Pro. In fact, looking at camera samples on the laptop right now, we realize that a lot of photos had very minor shake, but it was there. On the phone, it was not visible, but when you look at it on a bigger screen, you can see that there is shake in the photo. Let's take a look at this sample of our standard test shot that we've taken. In low light, you can see that there is a very severe degradation in detail quality. There is very little dynamic range. And when you even switch over to night mode, those two things don't change, but what you get is a slight color shift. There is a purple cast now in the images, which is very surprising because night mode typically tends to improve image quality, not make it look weirder. So we're going to chalk this one up to, let's say, the software update. But of course, once the update is out, we're going to revisit all of this testing. Taking shots of just objects inside the house, for example, in low light situations, of course, the results were fairly alright because we've got some shots that are adequately sharp. Even backlit subjects came out pretty alright. Now let's talk about outdoors daylight shots. Now this is the first time that we've seen a 48 megapixel sensor perform just as well as its 12 megapixel image counterpart. What I mean by that is if you shoot in the 48 MP mode, the images have the exact same dynamic range, the same kind of HDR algorithms applied as the 12 megapixel counterpart. Yes, there are very minor visual differences, but it is so minor that you'd probably be like, yeah, I'm better off shooting in the 48 MP mode and I'll edit it later. Why? Because you get the resolution. In fact, in the 12 megapixel mode, we noticed that shooting in situations of high contrast, there was some very weird artifacts in the images. There were parts of the image that looked like they had been cut out and repasted in the 12 megapixel mode, but that wasn't the case with the 48 MP mode. However, there are still certain areas with high contrast that have a very weird border around them, and you can see them in the image samples on your screen. Even when you zoom into the photos shot in daylight, you notice that while they look absolutely stellar on a display like this one, when you zoom in, there is no detail, and that again became a running theme for us throughout the camera test that we did for the Note 9 Pro. Moving on to the ultra-wide lens, however, things are a little better. Of course, there's no autofocus again, and expecting it to be there is sort of unrealistic at this price point, but the results were fairly good. The photos turn out pretty decent, they're usable. But what really took Note 9 Pro's camera down a notch was the fact that there is significant purple fringing in scenes with high contrast. Again, it seems that high contrast situations really do tend to bring this camera down to its knees. In this photo on your screen right now, you will notice that there is significant purple cast on both the left side of the photo and even in the scenes where there are leaves. This will happen every time you have high contrast scenes, which is basically you're shooting a subject which is backlit with a strong backlight. So that is a problem, unfortunately. On the back, you also have a macro camera, which actually surprisingly did pretty well. It doesn't have any kind of image stabilization, which is a bummer because as you get closer to a subject, you do want to be more stable. But if you do manage to get the shots right, they do look amazing, as you can see on the sample below. The camera also features an AI mode, which in our opinion is basically scene recognition and then applying certain color values. And it did not work out very well in our case, because when shooting food, for example, all it did was make everything look more yellow instead of replicating the natural tones of the shade of the food. So there is that unfortunate occurrence. But again, hopefully through a software update that Xiaomi says is planned, they will be improving this problem as well. Now, it's very interesting that the Redmi Note 9 Pro's camera is using a brand new sensor, which is, in our opinion, pretty good, because the kind of results it's producing in terms of dynamic range and color is very impressive. The 48 megapixel mode is yielding the same kind of output as the 12 megapixel binned image, with the only downside being a complete lack of detail. Zoom in on any of the photos and you'll notice that there is significant smudging of the detail. There is very little there, and that sort of leaves you wanting a little bit more, because what is the point of a 48 megapixel sensor if it's not able to replicate those fine textures? In fact, in shots of my own dog, I noticed that while they look great on the screen itself, zooming in, there's no detail once again. This leads us to believe that the Redmi Note 9 Pro's camera is tuned keeping in mind that the photos you take will never leave your smartphone or will never be viewed outside of a smartphone display. Because the minute you actually zoom in and blow them up, you realize that there is very little there to see. So best case scenario, images look stunning on your phone, they look stunning on social media, but try and print them, you're going to be at a loss, significant loss actually, of detail. Let's talk about the selfie camera. The front camera by default has beautification modes turned on, which in our opinion tend to take away from the quality of the image unless the quality is referred to as plastic looking skin. So we recommend that if you're going to be shooting with this camera a lot of selfies, then you should turn off these beautification modes. When you do that, you start to see better detail retention in the photos. However, the dynamic range is still something that is not that great. But the cool thing is the camera will actually detect a face and meter for the face. So essentially, even if you're shooting in mixed lighting conditions, you're shooting against the sun, the camera will prioritize your face over ambient exposure. So that's good, because that way you at least know that, you know, when you take the photo, you're going to be properly exposed. So that's a good thing, and that's essentially covering up all that we have to say about the Redmi Note 9 Pro's camera. In summary, no details in any of the photos. The lack of any kind of image stabilization makes it difficult to use in low light. Low light performance in general is not very impressive, including night mode. But daytime shots, the 48 megapixel mode produces stellar results, except for the fact that they lack detail. The ultra-wide lens has significant purple fringing, which we really hope Xiaomi fixes through a software update. And the macro lens does produce impressive results, only challenge being that you have to have a very stable hand in order to get that shot right. Hopefully this video has helped you guys making your decision about the Redmi Note 9 Pro's camera. In case you liked it, make sure to subscribe to our page. And if you want to see more test-based content from our channel, make sure to hit the bell icon so that you don't miss out any of our future videos. Thank you guys for watching this video, and I'm going to see you in the next one.